Listen, setting the stage for this season, they were so close last year. I thought that was of any of the years the closest they've been. I think most people thought that, and it kind of culminated in a can you finally pull the sword from the stone? Can you beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? And they didn't. And they didn't really show the offense was fantastic all year long. They scored 29 points in the AFC Championship game, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't up to Josh's standard. And in the big moments, it wasn't enough. There was the tush push, right? Which we lamented that call on this show. It was kind of a controversial call, but they didn't get it. 4th and 5, with the game on the line, Spags dials up the blitz, no surprise, and Josh has nowhere to go with the football, lobs a prayer to Kincaid. Kincaid actually drops the football, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the offense didn't do enough and Josh didn't do enough. But as we tally this thing up in the Mahomes Allen saga, it is worth noting that at least in 2024, Josh Allen's looking across the field in that game at Chris Jones, at Trent McDuffie, at Bolton, a defense that's well established, right? And Mahomes, who doesn't need any help, he's the best quarterback on the planet, right? Until Josh beats him in the playoffs. He's looking at barbecue chicken once Benford got hurt in that game. And we talked a lot about Kyer Elam, who's no longer with the team now, and the way he got picked on in that game, and the safety room, which we saw months earlier in training camp. We went to visit the Bills, and we said, is that what we're rolling out this year? And they did, and they wrote it out with that group of safeties, and they wrote it until the wheels fell off, and they had to depend on a guy like Cole Bishop, who was a second-round pick for them, and they wanted him to develop a lot quicker. It was not ideal. And, you talk about Russian coverage working together. In that game, Rousseau and Epinesa, who are homegrown talents, first and second-round picks, combined for 2 pressures. And to go back to it, I think the offense was fantastic last year. They were great. They didn't show up when it mattered. And, you could build a narrative on that, but that would be a narrative that lacked context. I mean, I think there were games, obviously most notably the playoff game, the overtime game with Kansas City, that I was there for in a suite on some edibles watching my brother's Kansas City Chiefs at that stage in his career. And that was the greatest football game of all time. I mean, that's the way I felt. It was one of my first experiences watching an NFL game in a stadium after I retired was that game. And I was spoiled. I saw 2 of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen in that game. So, certainly along the way in this series, you could point to the Bills not being ready, but I thought Josh has played well in the postseason. And largely the offense has showed up. It's just been Mahomes and the Chiefs have beaten them. This was the first time that I thought, hey, the offense was a little bit disappointing. And, for that reason, I think it's an anomaly. I think if they get back there again, the offense should be business as usual, and that's about just playing your best game when it matters. This isn't like a trend where they've laid an egg in the playoffs, like, say, the Ravens offensively at different points. Like, I think the defense is the fire you got to put out coming off that AFC Championship game. And I don't think that's a secret, right? That's the situation to monitor as we break down the AFC East and ultimately the Bills' chances to get in the big dance and finally, get that 400-pound gorilla off their back that's been sitting there since the 4 falls of Buffalo. And so that's the deal. Like, the defense has to play better in the biggest moments, and you have to think about, like, how do you beat the teams that you have to go through? So we got to put the fire out in the back end, and we got to stop the run up front, and we have to find a Batman-type rusher. If they can do 2 of those 3 things, they'll be a lot better off. If they can do all 3, now we're cooking, right? Offensively, I'm going to keep it simple with this offense. You got one of the best quarterbacks on the planet, right? And I don't care how you order them at ESPN. I personally think Josh is one of the best 3 quarterbacks on the planet. I think because of his track record in the playoffs relative to Lamar Jackson, I put him at 2. But it really doesn't matter because all these guys fit into the one category. I feel like there are 3 categories. Okay, the best category is you can win because of this quarterback. I think Josh fits squarely into that category. Next category is you can win with him, and then the third is you can win despite that quarterback. The latter 2 two classifications don't really matter here. Josh is a guy you can win because of. I think that's what makes them in a post, hey, we paid our quarterback era, still dangerous. And last year is evidence of that. So, you're a running football team. Since Joe Brady came along, he said, hey, we're not going to put everything on Josh's shoulders, as tempting as that is to do because he's like a one-man band. The turnovers went down. The run game got better. You got James Cook inked up to a big deal here. So all that's in the past. You have an offensive line that, is probably one of the better groups in the league. They have a 3% sack rate. You've got good tackles, solid interior. The backs catch the ball out of the backfield. All that's well and good. And a year ago, you worried about the wide receiver room. You said, hey, how are they going to turn the page into this chapter after you pay Josh Allen without the weapons outside? Well, that's the point. If a quarterback's worth paying, he should be able to elevate the pieces around him. And I think last year proved that he can do that. And last year proved that this team can run through the backs and the tight ends. They're going to run 12 personnel. They're going to be committed to the run game. If Josh is dinged, because they do like to run the ball with Josh, I think back to that Dallas game a couple years ago where he throws the ball 17 times. That's a new look for them where it's like we can lean on something else. And there are other examples of that where the run game kind of takes over for them. You also realize in the process that Shakir is probably the best slot guy that Josh has had. And Keon Coleman, while a lot of people wanted to see more his rookie year, I saw the flashes. You want another guy that can probably win matchups for you and complicate the way you game plan for this group, right? And I think that's where they turned to Amari Cooper last year. And while it didn't produce great returns, there were moments. But not having him this year doesn't mean that they're in some bad spot. Enter Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer's a swing guy in this offense to me. I mean, Amari Cooper caught probably 20 balls in the regular season. He had about 40 yards receiving in the playoffs, so he wasn't like a huge factor late in the season for them. But having that number two-ish guy, right, that's versatile, can work inside and outside for them would be a big deal. And I think Josh Palmer, considering they were balling on a budget, right, going out and trying to find that guy, but, up against it a little bit with the cap, Josh Palmer on a 3-year deal is a pretty good option for them. And, when he was in L.A., he was a guy who was kind of buried behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and he never really reached his perceived ceiling, if you ask Chargers fans. I think being an elite quarterback, that's your job, to get that out of him. And I'm not calling Justin Herbert a bum or anything, but he's not a capital E elite quarterback. I don't even think he's a lowercase e elite quarterback at this point. And I'm a fan of the guy, but there are levels. And so Josh Allen elevating Josh Palmer, I can totally see it. You've got this great quote from Josh Allen. His what do you like about Joshua Palmer? His separation with his feet, his body language, his catch rate is one of the best I've ever been around. And, when I met Josh Allen, he told me, he said, the first thing he said to me was, "You look great." And I was working on like 5 hours sleep and about, I deleted about 20 Miller Lights the night before. So I think he was lying. I think maybe he's a glass half full guy. And I think he likes to say the nice thing, but I tend to believe him on Josh Palmer, right? Like Josh Palmer looks great. He's got the best catch radius of anybody I've been around. He's a great route runner. We know that about Josh Palmer. Now it's just time for him to take the next step and help them. Like I said, he can work inside, he can work outside, and hopefully he'll make them a lot better. Because this offense is not broken. There's no need to fix it. As I said before, it's about them showing up when it mattered. It was there for them in the AFC Championship. They didn't play their best game. They got hopefully better with Josh Palmer. You get James Cook inked to a long-term deal. Get that in the past and just continue down the path you're on.